All right, today we're putting on our detective hats. We're going to dive deep into the Talmud, but not just to read it. Nope. We're here to solve a logical puzzle that shows how ancient scholars built an entire legal system, all based on something as simple as the order of a list.
And that's really the big question, isn't it? Because you have to understand, in the world of the Talmud, nothing is accidental. The way a list is ordered, that's not just a list, it's a clue. It's a breadcrumb trail that leads us straight into the mind of a brilliant and incredibly detailed legal system. Okay, let's get into it. Our story kicks off with a text from the Mishnah, which is a core part of the Jewish Talmud. It's laying out the rules for sacrifices in the ancient temple. And right out of the gate, the sages notice something just feels off. So the text starts by talking about these specific sin offerings for Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And it says they have to be slaughtered in the northern part of the temple courtyard. Seems straightforward enough, right? But for the Talmudic mind, where every single word is there for a reason, starting the list here is a huge red flag. You see, the original biblical source, the place where this whole slaughter in the north rule actually comes from, is a totally different sacrifice. It's the burnt offering. So you'd think, logically, you'd start with the original case, the burnt offering, and then explain how the rule gets applied to other stuff, like the sin offering, but it's backward. Why? And here's the first clue the Talmud gives us. It suggests that the scholar who wrote this, the Tana, put the sin offering first because he had to work for it. The rule wasn't just spelled out in the Bible. He had to figure it out, to derive it. You know, it's like a really tough puzzle you finally crack. You're way more proud of that solution than the easy ones. That law he had to fight for was dearer to him, so he put it right at the top. And this whole process of digging in and deriving laws is called midrash. You should think of it like high-level legal analysis. You're not just reading the text. You're trying to uncover the deep principles and the hidden connections to build a whole legal system. This is really the engine that drives all of Talmudic law. Okay, so let's keep peeling back the layers here, because just as we think we've solved one puzzle, a much deeper one shows up. See, the whole argument we just heard rests on the idea that the slaughter in the north rule comes from the burnt offering. But if you go look at that original text, well, there's another problem. Get this, the verse in the Bible that explicitly says to slaughter something northward is talking about a burnt offering from the flock, like a sheep or a goat. It says absolutely nothing about a bull, which comes from the herd. So how on earth did they know the rule applied to bulls too? So, how do they solve this? Well, the answer is hiding in plain sight, right in the structure of the biblical text itself. The rules for the bull offering come first. That's what the sages call the upper passage. And then, immediately after that, the text talks about the sheep offering in the lower passage. The sages use this amazing principle called hekesh, or juxtaposition. The logic is, because that second passage starts with the little connector phrase "and if," it creates a link between the two sections, and that link lets them say that the details in the lower part, like the northward rule for sheep, can be applied to the upper part about the bull. So problem solved, right? Well, not so fast. And this is where things get really interesting, because this one little rule opens up a massive debate. It turns out not everybody agrees on exactly how you're supposed to use these powerful interpretive tools. And this leads us to a huge clash between two of the greatest sages you'll ever read about. So to figure this out, the Talmud does something brilliant. It pulls in a totally different case that turns on the exact same point of logic. This case is about a provisional guilt offering. It's what you bring if you're not even sure you sinned. And in this case, the great Rabbi Akiva says you are liable to bring it, while its colleagues, who are just called the rabbis, say you are exempt. The idea is, if they can solve this disagreement, they can solve our original one. Okay, so now our detective story really kicks into high gear. The Talmud is on a mission. It wants to find the single core principle of logic that's causing these brilliant thinkers to end up in two completely different places. What's the one little thing they disagree on that explains everything? Now, the first theory you might come up with is pretty simple. Maybe the rabbis just don't buy this whole upper learns from lower juxtaposition idea at all. But nope, the Talmud shuts that down right away. It's just too easy of an answer. It says that everybody, Rabbi Akiva and the rabbis, agrees that this is a totally valid way to interpret the text. The real issue has to be way more subtle. So if they both agree on the tool, what's the deal? The Talmud floats a new theory. Maybe the rabbis are actually using a different interpretive tool, one that they think is more important and overrides juxtaposition in this one specific situation.
This new tool is called Gezerah, or verbal analogy. The idea is pretty cool, actually. If you find the exact same unique word or phrase in two totally separate parts of the Bible, it acts like a bridge, creating a legal link between them. Then you can take the rules from one law and apply them to the other.
And that's precisely the move the rabbis make. They find the word commandments, in our case, and use it to build a bridge to a completely different law about sin offerings. And based on that other law, they argue that in our case, the person should be exempt. It's a really strong argument, and it comes from a totally different direction.
So now it looks like we've got our answer. Maybe this is a showdown between two different legal methods. You've got Rabbi Akiva in one corner with juxtaposition, learning from the text right next door. And in the other corner, you have the rabbis with verbal analogy, learning from a shared word far away. Which one wins? But just when you think you've got it, bam, another plot twist. The Talmud just states, as a matter of principle that everybody agrees, juxtaposition is the stronger tool. Learning from the verse right next to you is seen as a more direct, more powerful connection than learning from a single word in a faraway verse. So now we're right back where we started. Both sides accept juxtaposition and both agree it's the better tool for the job. How can they possibly still disagree? And the final answer, the solution to the whole puzzle, is just so elegant. It's mind-blowing. It turns out the disagreement isn't about which tool to use, it's about how you use it. The real conflict is hidden in the very mechanics of the rule itself. And here it is. This is the whole ball game. Just look at this table. Both sides are using the exact same tool, juxtaposition. But look closer. They disagree on the direction of learning. Rabbi Akiva says the upper passage learns from the lower one, and that tells him about the scope of the law, if an offering is even required. He concludes that yes, it is. But the rabbis argue the complete opposite. They say the lower passage learns from the upper one, and that teaches them something totally different. Not if an offering is needed, but what its minimum value has to be. They're using the same tool, just pointing it in opposite directions to learn two totally different things from the exact same verses. So, after all that, what's the big takeaway? Well, first, it shows that these legal principles are built on an unbelievably careful reading of the text. Second, there's a clear ranking system for the rules of interpretation. And third, and maybe this is the most important part, this kind of principled disagreement isn't a bug in the system, it's the feature. It's the engine that actually builds the law. It proves that in this world, nothing is an accident. Every single word and where it's placed is packed with meaning. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. This whole ancient exercise isn't just about old sacrifices. It's a masterclass in how legal systems are built from the ground up. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? What are the invisible rules, the hidden juxtapositions and verbal analogies that our own judges and lawyers are using right now to shape the laws that govern all of our lives?